What's up, grinders? Welcome back to the channel. Now, do you remember about 2 weeks ago, or probably less than that, it's hard to say in YouTube time, everything gets a little bit fuzzy, but I made two videos. One was called Spencer, I Don't Believe You, and the second was called Spencer Responded. Now, if you've seen those videos, you're probably wondering what happened after that, because it seemed like I just dropped the whole thing, and for those who haven't seen it, you might need to go watch those videos first. But I will give you the summary, because I know a lot of you are just, TikTok brain, you don't want to have to go watch other videos. So basically what happened was, this YouTube channel right here appeared on the scene called Fluency Formula, and we have this guy here called Spencer, who basically started dropping videos talking about how you could learn Chinese within something like 200 days, or like, it was basically 6 months type of thing, and you could get to fluency, and then he basically then told everyone that he got to C1 level within a year. Now, that second part, the C1 level within a year, that came out later on, because I was focused on that whole 6 months to conversational fluency, and he was talking specifically about being able to talk about politics and stuff. If you want to see all the details, go watch the videos. But basically, I dropped a bunch of videos and I was like, yeah, nah, man, I call bullshit on this. I don't believe it, okay? I don't believe it for a second. He commented, I responded to his comments. Then he made this video right here, Response to Evildea, where he responded to basically a lot of the controversy that I generated. And basically the whole problem came down to this. I asked for proof that he did it in 6 months. He said he didn't have any proof. And I said, well, if you don't have any proof, I don't believe you. And he said, that's great. Not much I can do about that. And I was like, okay, I guess that's the end of it pretty much. And I thought that was it. I thought it was all over. But over the last few weeks, I have been slowly getting fed various little bits of information here and there, kind of prove that he lied to me in different ways. Okay, so we're going to look at some of this information, and the reason I didn't bring this up sooner is because, well, it just didn't seem worth it, realistically. Like, I thought it was kind of obvious in some ways, but then another YouTuber, this YouTuber right here, Psycholingo, started dropping some videos on Spencer. And if you have a look here, I've actually watched both of them. He's got, is this course really worth $5,400? I was like, what? What is this course he's talking about? And it turns out to be Spencer's course. And then we've got C1 Fluency in a year. And both of these videos go further into depth. They basically continue on what I stopped doing. But I want to review these now, not in full detail, because that's an hour worth of content right there. We're going to take a look at some snippets, and then I'm going to show you the additional information that I've been fed over basically the last 2 weeks, and we're going to start getting a better image of what actually happened here. So first up, let's have a look at the questions I posed to Spencer. So basically, here was my video, Spencer, I Don't Believe You. He actually responded, and then he answered some of my questions. He said my daily input was 3 hours, give or take, which could mean, maybe 2 hours some day, 4 hours on others. However, in the original video I was critiquing, he said, some days he only just reached an hour every day in order to get to conversational in 6 months. So I did not believe that. I asked him for like hard numbers on how much he did every day, and this is what he told me, 3 hours give or take. And then he said, to be clear, last year 2024 was the first time I ever studied any Chinese of any kind. So he was very specific that he did not study Chinese before that. But of course I had no proof. He didn't have any proof that he did. That was the end of it, basically. Now, this is where things got a little bit wacky, you see. I started receiving emails from people who basically saw my videos and then signed up to his course. And they were marketing emails, and they were very strangely worded. Okay, so here is one of the marketing emails that's sent out. He sends out a marketing email every day. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right but still can't speak a new language? The backwards approach most people follow. So he's talking about this is what most people follow. But then the wording becomes first person. That's very strange. 3 years ago, I couldn't introduce myself in Mandarin. So is he talking about himself, or is he talking about most people? Because most people don't start Mandarin 3 years ago. Like, they started all sorts of random times. So is this just a completely made up story, or is this his own story? My desk was a language learner's dream, color-coded notebooks, premium app subscriptions, and a rigid 2-hour daily study schedule. Okay, so 3 years ago, the supposed person in this marketing email, which I assume is him, was doing 2 hours a day of study of Mandarin Chinese. I was the definition of discipline and determination. 6 months later, I could barely string together basic sentences. Now, what he's saying here in this email actually fits quite nicely with the first video that I critiqued, because he mentioned in ways, you know, that this is a bad approach. And basically, he's showing here that he started Mandarin Chinese 3 years ago. But if you saw my poster just a second ago, he told me he didn't start until 2024. So which is it? 3 years ago or 1 year ago? But anyway, let's continue. I could barely string together basic sentences. Every conversation was painful, with that awkward mental translation delay making me feel like my brain was buffering. Sound familiar? Here's the shocking truth. And then he goes down here. As someone obsessed with efficiency, occupational hazard, I started questioning everything I thought I knew about language learning. So this is not some arbitrary made-up person. This is him. This is him telling us his story. He started Mandarin 3 years ago. Okay? Now, I know you could look at this and say this is what most people do, but most people are not like COOs. Okay? Then, unless this is like the worst worded freaking marketing email in existence. Anyway, what I discovered completely transformed my approach and helped me go from struggling beginner to confidently handling business discussions in Mandarin. Today, I'll reveal the counterintuitive method, blah, 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 okay? And then here he talks about the value of his course, $497. I saw that. I thought it was ridiculous. I was like, Jesus Christ, that's a lot of money. But I did not see $5,000, which is this one right here. Now, also, I want to point out, okay, so basically, this statement here, to be clear, last year, 2024, was the first time I ever studied any Chinese of any kind. By your own words, you're lying, okay? That is your marketing email. And you may think that I've made this up, but that marketing email has been sent to at least 5 people now. I've had 5 people. I don't know why so many people decided to go sign up to your course. Maybe they were just curious, but 5 people went, signed up, and they've got that marketing email. Like, if you got that marketing email, please say so in the comments section below so people know I'm not just making this shit up. Okay, cool, thanks. Now, the next comment was this one here. Daily input was give or take 3 hours, basically, a day. Now, in this response video, he actually mentions the fact that he's going to go on a podcast. It's actually quite a popular podcast for people at an intermediate level, and he said he's going to be interviewed on it. And of course, that's interesting. That's going to prove his capabilities, you know, C1 level, so I was waiting for that. He did show off a little bit of Chinese at the beginning of this, but like, I didn't think about it too much. In fact, I didn't know who this other person was, but apparently it's a friend of his girlfriend. So just so we've got that information out there, which was discovered by the other YouTube channel I will show you in a minute. Apparently, he has already been mentioned on Dashu Mandarin Chinese, and I'm going to show you that segment right now. Okay, so I'm going to turn on subtitles, and we're going to watch this video. Now, the segment starts off talking about a fan of the channel who actually basically starts speaking with Ben here. And they basically mention the fan's name is Da Long, and then they later on say it's literally Spencer because they mention his name, okay? And they talk about the fact that he's going to reveal his methods in the future. And this was like after, I think, 6 months into his journey, so he had a plan by this stage already.
他名字好像取了个有一个中文名字叫什么大龙，是他吗？
大龙，对啊，但是那个是他的那个 nickname， 所以他打算他第二个目标就是未来有一天来大叔让我们采访他。
So one of his goals here that they just said is that this Da Long, which is Spencer, you'll find out later, wants to be interviewed on this channel, okay? Which means he has a plan, or at least he's got a goal.
因为他跟其他的学生不太一样，就是他的背景真的是独一无二的。因为一般看我们的节目的都是这个中高级的学生，对，就已经有一定的中文基础了。对，他是从零基础来听我们的播客。
So basically, Ben is under the belief that from literally zero, no Chinese at all, Spencer has come here and just started watching this intermediate level podcast and therefore has, you know, just learned the language via comprehensible input.
因为他真的不知道这个语言怎么回事儿，然后他也不是那种喜欢去看语法视频或者是教材的学生。然后他说他8个月来，他最主要的学习中文的工具就是听。
他就从零开始听吗？
他从零开始听大叔中文，他就是觉得这个语言是怎么回事的，然后他就过来听。就像灿叔说的，他是一个非常 学习比较极端的一个学生，他说每天至少听4个小时的大叔的播客。
So every day he's listening 4 hours to this podcast. Now, I assumed at the time when I heard this 4 hours, okay, so this is a guy who had a business prior to this, because he talks about, having a business, and I believe he actually sold his business. So maybe he just had, empty days for a year and he dedicated that time to learning a language. It actually happens quite a bit when people, they sell their business, they've got a big windfall, and they spend a year doing that thing that they always wanted to do. So I assumed that was what happened.
然后从4个小时到8个小时。
So now from 4 to 8 hours, okay, so 4 hours, and now we're up to 8 hours. This is not 3 hours a day.
很多天，一周有很多天都是就是连续听大叔中文听8个小时。
太闲了，一天到这么多时间。
Now, they don't specify here whether this was, active listening or passive listening, but even 8 hours of just passively listening, let's just say this is all passively listening to their podcast every day. That's just an insane amount of hours, and it would explain why, if it was done in a year, that you could actually possibly get the numbers up to conversational, but then I believe it would have to be literally active listening.
没有，是他的爱好。
可是他的确在我们几乎每一个视频下面都有，
对，
所以我确定他是的确每一个视频都有把它
So he has actually been watching their videos, so we know that's not a lie because he's been commenting under them.
看完的。
是的，
对，他说除了播客之外，我们发的其他的大大小小的视频，各种主题的视频，他每一个不落的都看了，而且每一个都看了，就是至少10多遍啊。那个他很喜欢北方口音，所以我的北方同学来的时候，就北京口音那一期，他说
对，
他说他看了不下40多遍，
一毫那。
So basically now what's happened is that Spencer's been training himself from 4 to 8 hours a day on this podcast with the intention of getting onto this podcast.
那一集
一毫那一集，对啊，
给我们贡献40多个播放量啊。
然后我就觉得哇，我从来没有遇到这样背景的学生，
是
啊。然后他上课的时候，他说你也不需要纠正我语法，不需要纠正我，我希望你能够很放松的跟我上课，就是跟我聊天，然后
So you can see that Ben here has been a teacher for him, which means that he's obviously paid tutors.
然后我就觉得真的与众不同的学生，他自己同时还在学日语，也是用同样的方法，然后我觉得非常挑战，都是他完全不熟悉的语言，他同时我觉得学日语。
Now, I don't know how many hours he's put into Japanese, but even if he did half of that, and we say he did half the Chinese, that'd be 8 hours a day. But let's say he did the full 8 hours a day, and then he did 4 hours with Chinese. That's an entire workday.
日语很难，学中文很难，他把2个叠加在一起学习，就是真的他让我挺佩服的一个学生。
我好奇的一点就是，因为我们是有中文字幕的，他一开始是0的话，他连中文都不认识，他是怎么理解我们说的话？
对啊，
英文字幕，
他就是大量的输入。
So you can see even here, one of the teachers on the left is actually confused about this. How is he just, getting all this from zero? Even if you are a fundamental believer of the comprehensible input methodology for learning a language via pure input, okay, which is basically what Spencer, talks about. This is not just something where you just get a massive amount of input and that's it. You have to be very specific about the input. It needs to be at a level where you already have 90, 95, maybe even up to 98 comprehensibility in order to pick up words in context.
但是我想问他这个方法的时候，他说他正在研究，他想把这个方法就是最后自己总结出来，然后形成一个
理论，自己的理论，
一个理论。然后他现在也在提高自己的中文，他等待着那一天上我们的节目来跟我们分享其方法。我觉得真的。
那Ben叔，你跟他上过一堂课，你觉得他的发音怎么样？到目前为止的水平，发音如何？
他的发音很好，因为他的发音很好，就会让我觉得他的水平要高于他那个。他给我一个错觉，我会觉得他的水平很高，但其实他是中级水平。
Now that is very important for what we're going to watch next. So he has good pronunciation, but he's actually at an intermediate level. However, this was 7 months ago, so maybe he is C1 by now.
OK，
就是那个准确度，用词的准确度还不够，但是因为他输入很多，而且都是跟我们3个听我们的播客，所以他说话的感觉是那种
很
自然的、
自然的
流畅的，然后发音也是标准的，所以这个也是让我挺吃惊的地方。
看来大叔中文真是学习中文的好材料呢，同学们，
大家赶快订阅，赶快订阅。不过这个很让人惊讶，就是当然我们之前跟可能老师他们讨论过 CI 的好处，就是沉浸式的学习。但是我一直觉得
我们这个不算 CI 啊，我们这个就是因为他就开始听那么多，他都听不懂，100%听不懂。
对，就是
然后就慢慢的就，
因为 CI 是你的水平+1那样子。
Yeah, you can see that they're very confused about this. Like, how is this working? It does not make sense.
但是这个 Spencer 一开始就是几乎是零基础的状态，所以这中间一定会有一些方法是他独有的，他自己。
Yep, so there must be some unique methods that he has invented himself. Now, you can watch the rest of this podcast yourself. I'm not going to go through the entire thing, and they move on to other subjects. But I think this gives a pretty good idea of what was happening, that there was at least 4 to 8 hours worth of study, and it started before 2024. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to review this video right here. And now this guy lives in China. He speaks Chinese better than me. And I feel a lot more confident actually referring to him because I feel like me and Spencer are on a similar level. Although Spencer's probably got like micro fluency in talking about his course and language learning. Like that's where he's focused most of his attention. Although I could be totally wrong. Maybe all across the board he's very, very good. But we need to see him talking about like a wide array of topics in order to be able to truly judge, you know, if that's C1 in basically most topics, or if he's just like really good at that one specific topic. Now, this guy here is also doing, I believe he's doing his doctorate, and also he's basically highly experienced in language acquisition, you know, language teaching, all this type of stuff. So he's basically the go-to guy when it comes to this type of stuff.
He has a response to Evildea. Evildea essentially challenged him. So we're going to look at a few of his responses.
Now, I would say I'm at a C1 level personally. Now, look, you might disagree with me and say that I'm at a B2 level, high B2. I'm not sure. The reason why I said C1 is because according to my understanding, C1 have the ability to, I guess, argue and dispute claims and talk about a wide variety of subjects and not just for like 2 minutes. Like they're able to have fully like hour-long conversations, let's say, which is something that you're going to see appearing pretty soon on...
So I will say he does mention that based on his understanding, and there's a reason this really hits a chord with me, he has no background, at least from what I can tell. I looked him up on LinkedIn, and his girlfriend as well, because they're doing this company together.
Okay, so I just wanted to point out that both him and his girlfriend here are working together on this company, which means obviously she can't be a reliable source at all. In the video we've seen so far, where he did the response, he spoke with another Chinese person, which was the friend of his girlfriend. So it's like, at the moment, it's all in-house. Now, the conversation around Will Hart is brought up, and Will Hart is a YouTuber who learnt Chinese in about 1.5 years and got to a similar level, but Will Hart was very honest about how many hours he put into it every day, and in fact, he mentioned 8 hours a day.
Another thing that I wanted to address is how he talks about the method. I mentioned it earlier in the video, but he mentions that like his method is new. So I'm going to show you a clip.
Always what happens when something new comes along is that it basically threatens what has the existing thought and existing school of thought towards something. The reality is that before Will Hart came along, people thought, okay, this wasn't possible, right? People accuse, for example, the comprehensible input approach of being like tragically slow, and I get that. But until he came along, people were like, oh, okay, I didn't think you could study that well. And then he became, or study that fast rather, and then he became the benchmark for like how fast you could go. Now, obviously, spending as much time as I spent, which is hours a day studying, right? Spending that much time in the language, of course I'm going to encounter Will Hart as someone who just is a fan.
Spencer is saying that his idea is new and it threatens this like traditional view of language learning. But the idea is not new. Comprehensible input is one of the first hypotheses. It's actually like Stephen Krashen's second language acquisition theory. And he has 5 hypotheses, and one of them is the comprehensible input hypothesis. That's been around since the 70s.
Now, what I want to add to this as well is the fact that he talks about basically building on top of, what Will Hart has done. He mentions that actually in one of the comments on my YouTube channel. But the funny thing is, Will Hart is a massive proponent of using flashcards and using closed flashcards. And he's spoken about this in videos. I did a review of one of Will Hart's videos where I said this guy knows what he's on about. And Spencer actually talks very negatively about flashcards in some areas, but then also other areas he talks about spaced repetition and stuff. But the fact is that he's not doing what Will Hart did. He's actually doing something completely different in a lot of ways. Now, obviously, Will Hart also got a lot of input, but Will Hart talks a lot about flashcards. Now, one of the big things I said is if you manage to get to C1 level in a year, you're a freaking genius, okay? This is it's just so outlandish of a claim. And I'm so glad to see someone who is actually a specialist in this field kind of back me up with that. Listen to this.
You can pause the video and read it if you want. I just don't want to read the whole thing. So, in fact, you should be studied as a case because your claims go beyond what has been generally found to be true in the literature on second language learning, which is true. If you learn Chinese to a C1 level, or even B2 or anything, even within a year time, let's not say his 187 days, let's just say a year time from when he made the video. That's impressive. If you really truly got to C1 fluency, which I don't think he is C1 fluency, but if he did, he should be studied because the majority of people don't do that. After all, it is possible that you are an exception to the rule and your method will not help others. So maybe he's a language learning savant or something, and then he's trying to sell this to people. If it's an atypical thing that most people can't do, it would be dishonest to sell it.
Now, here's an interesting part. We actually get a look at another marketing email right now from Spencer, and I think it backs up what I've been claiming.
What would it feel like to finally express yourself freely in your target language? If you're tired of hitting the frustrating plateau, I'd love to help you break through. It's weird though because his course is a 0, get to fluency in 200 days. 0 to hero, that's online, that's the whole thing now with online sales is you want to show the 0 to hero transformation. But here he's talking about breaking through the plateau, which is in the intermediate phase. That's not a 0. And that's well beyond what I don't even understand.
Okay, so what I've reckoned realistically has happened is Spencer's been at this for a number of years. I'm just going to be honest. He's been at it for a number of years, although in the last year or so, he put into 8 hours a day of pure input, but he already had a solid foundation. And my belief that he already had a solid foundation is literally based on the fact that in his first video, he talks about, the things that didn't work. So it's clearly he's done hard study, 2 hours per day, backed up by that marketing email, got frustrated, went to pure input and was oh my god, it's working, I'm finally learning the language. Which is the most obvious path that most people eventually stumble upon. They start with traditional methods, they feel like they're frustrated and they're not making any progress, and then when they start actual doing mass input, they suddenly make progress because everything that they've learned traditionally is now actually being utilized in their, in their daily life. Even watching this content, they're hearing it over and over and over. But without that fundamental start, that hard grind at the beginning, you don't get all that benefit later on. So it's this seems to be just the most common run-of-the-mill path that everyone takes, except now it's been wrapped up in a whole heap of marketing stuff. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to watch a short clip from this 36-minute long video where these two individuals, so it's obviously the guy that I was reviewing, and then also a native Chinese speaker, review the tiny segment of Chinese that he's done to determine if he is a C1 speaker or not.
这个女孩和我知道的学习战略这个事情结合起来，反正听起来很奇怪，我就是他的意思表示的很不明确，我觉得。
Yeah， 所以我也说了，他的水平不应该到 C1， 因为他逻辑问题很多，就是他本来在脑子里面可能会想的是没有问题的，但是他要I guess 表达出来，他没法说，或至少他没法好好把逻辑 A 到 B 到 C，you know， 他直接从 A 到 Z，and so 听着的人，比如说他朋友在听他。因为他有背景的知识，他已经知道这个他讲的事情，所以他可以用这个去猜他的意思。然后你也是，就是我昨天跟你谈过这个视频，也是你最开始说你不是很就是不是很听得懂他说什么，不明白。但是是因为他讲的逻辑有问题。
对，
其实 我能理解 ，like 比如说我会说中文，但是如果我要写作的话，我写逻辑不在。
So basically what they're saying is that he's able to quickly create sentences, but logically they don't work. Basically, he will connect things that just don't connect together. And then what's happening is his friend, who's obviously not going to like call him out on this or anything, is basically listening, has an understanding of what Spencer's trying to say, and also an understanding of like the overall background here, and is basically putting together what Spencer's intended like intention is, and then continuing the conversation on like that. So in summary, Spencer has definitely been studying Mandarin Chinese for longer than a year because his own damn marketing materials tell us so. He's been studying for more than 3 hours per day because indirect sources, which are sources that he refers to himself, have also mentioned the fact that he's done more than 3 hours a day. And it's not just like 1 hour more, it's like 4 to 8 all up, okay? Compared to what he said, which was 3. And he's not a C1 level. He's probably more in line with my own level. Maybe he's a little bit better, especially around speaking on this specific topic because he seems to have microfluency here. But overall, his Chinese is definitely not a C1 level. That's pretty much it. I'll see you all in the next video. And if you have any of your own information on the Spencer case, let us know in the comment section.